Hi again, I'm here with Neil Cook, who is the Head of Legal Operations at Woolworths, and we actually did our design thinking course together with Innovations a few years ago now, which was a fantastic light bulb moment for me, and it was fantastic to meet Neil there as well, and we've kept in touch. And Neil is going to give us a great perspective in terms of using design thinking in an in-house context. So really looking forward to hearing what he's going to tell us today. Thank you very much, Neil.
Oh, my pleasure. That's all right.
Coming. So I'm going to start with asking you what skill you would like to have that you don't have now.
I probably think I'd like to improve my skills around the facilitation of design thinking sessions. I think one of the challenges, I mean it's a challenge in wherever you work, but I think one of the challenges in-house is just the time to focus on these kinds of things, because the team is moving so fast in terms of servicing the business that there's often not a lot of sort of free time or spare time just to sit back and think about, you know, design thinking as an activity or agile or whatever it might be. So I think for me, probably getting more time to practice it would be a good thing. So
yeah, we've been talking a bit about that today, that whole learning by doing
yes, absolutely.
side of things. Yeah, fantastic.
And I think for me, that's one of the key things with design thinking, is not getting hung up in having to have this huge end-to-end process, and you can only do it through 3-hour workshops or longer, and you know, is using bits of it, you know, in the moment almost sometimes. But it's obviously very much a mindset thing as well. So
yeah, absolutely, and we'll come to that. I'm interested to hear what you're saying too, because it's something that I hear, or I'm seeing too, that whole idea of using design thinking as how it works for you, and not being that rigid in terms of how it's used. How have you seen that play out in an in-house context?
yeah, I mean, again, I think it's probably a time issue. It's you know, if I was to say to my GCs or the lawyers in our team, you know, you've got to give up half a day to do a design thinking workshop, there would be very little chance that I would get a green light to do that kind of thing. So it's really around, you know, how do we find moments within a project or within a process that we're reviewing, or there's a real key business challenge to go, well, let's use some of the techniques from design thinking, whether it's empathetic interviewing or, you know, ideation and that kind of thing, within the context of something else you're doing, rather than, as I say, thinking, you know, you've got to go through this sort of 6 or 7 step process and then come back again. And, you know, that's just not realistic, and certainly in-house is not realistic anyway. So.
Yeah, interesting, and I find that too. You find yourself using those skills that you learn as a designer in bits and pieces, the brainstorming sort of rules or guides, sort of, and that type of thing, or even that, as you say, that empathetic listening or research.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, we're doing a couple of projects at the moment. Well, we're sort of towards the end of a proof of concept, which is, you know, which lots of in-house teams have already done, but is automating an NDA, and so, you know, for us that was a really good opportunity where, you know, the business is doing lots of these NDAs. You know, traditionally was a very very much written through the eyes of a lawyer, so it looked like a contract. It was pretty impenetrable, and so we've sort of flipped that on its head and got the legal team to rethink about design this through the eyes of the end user, i.e. the people in the business who are actually completing these things. So again, you know, that was a problem that came out of the business, or feedback that came out of the business, and you know, over a few short sessions using just some design thinking principles to really sort of hone in on a new product there. So.
Fantastic. And you mentioned before that mindset change, and I know you've worked in law firms and in-house. Are there common themes that you see that need to change in terms of the mindset of the lawyers?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I mean, it's interesting, you know, that having moved from private practice to in-house, there was, in my view, there's this chalk and cheese in the way that lawyers operate. In that, you know, when you're in-house, you're no different to HR or finance or IT. You're a service provider to the business, and you know, you've got to be really sharp when it comes to adding value to the business and be incredibly customer focused. That's not to say that lawyers who are in private practice don't think that way, but I think it's even more, you know, there's an even sharper focus on that within in-house. So I think, you know, lawyers have to get away from thinking they're the smartest people in the room and actually go, you know, we're not really, a lot of what we do is not massively highly strategic here, but we can really add value and get away from thinking about the technicalities of black letter law and actually thinking more about what does this mean for the business, how can we use our broader commercial skills plus the legal skills to add value to the business, rather than thinking, the business is really going to be into a 500-page document with every nuance of the law sort of honed in on it. So, and I think that's where lawyers who make that transition can often find it quite difficult, where there's not the time to be doing a lot of research and not the time to be a lot of thinking around the legal issues. You've got to be really snappy and quick in the way you respond to the business.
And collaborating with other parts of the business.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that's really great in our team is, and it's probably quite common in in-house teams, is the lawyers don't sit in a legal. We have a legal neighbourhood. We're in activity-based working where we are in Sydney, and we have a legal neighbourhood. But all of our teams are more or less out with the business unit. So there'll be a team that sits with the Big W team, or a team that sits with the supermarkets team, and that's the team that they work with on a day-to-day basis. And they may come back to the legal neighbourhood from time to time, and that's where the sort of support team is. But yeah, that real sense of being immersed in the business and collaborating with them is absolutely essential to the success of our team.
Absolutely. So. And in terms of, I suppose the overall themes of design thinking, so we've talked a bit about the empathy and having that, empathetic interviews or whatever, interviews, and then the collaboration piece. In terms of the experimentation piece, how have you found that? Have you had a chance to roll that type of thing?
I mean, I think it's, again, I think, lawyers, when they're in-house, they have to be prepared to go with the 80-20 rule or go with on occasions, a minimum viable product and actually get that out to the business. I mean, we're in the middle of rolling Agile out as a business, and so, the mindset around, you can't go for perfect every time, and you've got to be prepared to experiment with these things. And on occasions they may not work, and you obviously go back and ideate again. And I think, sometimes that can be a struggle for lawyers because they want to be perfect, or they want to have every T crossed and I dotted around the law. Quite frankly, the business doesn't really care about the purity of the legal aspects of it. They just want a product they can get out there, and the business is moving, especially in retail, the business is moving so fast that you have to be prepared to experiment and go with things that may not work the first time. As long as they don't cause major commercial or legal risk issues, then the mindset of the lawyers has to be that way. And I think we have lawyers that are already probably not wired like traditional lawyers and actually think that way, and that's how they operate. But we also have a few that probably struggle with that and are therefore not drawn to that kind of work with the business.
That's interesting. Why do you think that there seem to be more lawyers that want to work in the way that you're talking about, being a bit more agile and experimenting and that?
Well, I mean, firstly, in our organisation, I think if you want to be successful, then you've really got to work that way. I think it's a long time since the legal teams have been able to be an island and go, well, we're special and we're different and we can operate differently. Because, quite frankly, if you had that mindset, the business would completely ignore us as a legal function and either not do the things they should be doing, or would go outside and get external legal advice in a very sort of precise way. But so I think there's a big thing about how does a legal team add value and how do you as a lawyer add value, and it's just the demand that comes out of the business constantly. If you're not relevant and you're not adding value, and you're not at the front end of a lot of these conversations, especially the strategic ones, then the business just won't use you. So I think for the really savvy lawyers that see that and experience that, then they change the way they're operating.
And talking about that whole empathy and user-centred design, if you're using that and creating something, you're creating value, aren't you, for those people? Yeah.
So we have constant conversations about, even when we're building our own internal system, so we're working on a file management system at the moment, and a lot of the conversations we're having is, this isn't about the legal team, this is actually about the business, because most of what we produce should be business facing and should be something the business has to use, and therefore if we're not designing this with the business, quite frankly with the business predominantly in mind, if we're just sitting and going, well, this actually makes our lives easier, but we're not really thinking about the business, then A, we're not going to get the money to invest in something, and B, we're completely missing the point about what our function is there for.
So tell me a bit more about that project. Have you used some design thinking principles around that project?
Yeah, we have. I mean, unfortunately, we were going down the route of putting in a traditional document management system, and then the sort of traditional budget cuts came in, and unfortunately that budget got chopped. We're a Google organisation, so and we use Google Team Drives for our sort of document management at the moment. So it's early days, but we're trying to work with the lawyers around how do we want to organise ourselves internally as a legal group, and there's a really large component there where a lot of the documentation or content that we're managing is also used by the business. So how do we, I was having conversations today about how do we actually collaborate with the business, and how do we design the system to make it easier for the business to access content, to keep themselves up to date with the most relevant content, because often the lawyers will revert back to how does it make my life easier on a day-to-day basis, which I get, but
one part of the puzzle, isn't it?
it is one part of the puzzle, and you've constantly got to have that. If I was somebody in the business interacting with the legal team, how do I make it easier for them to find the information and use the information?
Fantastic. And it's interesting too, you're using the terms in terms of those pain points or those issues that you're trying to solve. So obviously process a lot of the time in the in-house sort of side of things, and also the document automation, that type of thing. Any other types of areas that you're seeing it used?
Yeah, I mean, I think getting away from, making, I mean, the NDA example that I gave you earlier on was, we've moved it from being quite a long, laborious sort of contract-looking document to actually a letter form now. So it's much more user-friendly if you're on the business side and you're filling it in. So we're actually using checkboxes. We're doing a proof of concept, and we're using checkboxes as the tech product. And we're thinking about how do we actually bring information to the end user, to the person in the business, whether it's looking up an ABN number or that kind of thing. So again, it's not it might be only a 10-minute process, but if we can reduce that down to 2 minutes and just get it out of the way, it's low value, but it's also a pain point if you're in the business and you've got to try and find information, or it's a laborious process to go through. So there's a lot of that combination of, how can we smooth the process? How can we use tech to automate it? How can we make it easier for the business to fill in? Which, quite frankly, is a low value product, but it's something that still needs to get done, and there's a lot of them. So,
interestingly too, that idea that by using design thinking too, and actually thinking about what you're trying to produce in the end user, I can imagine this would be invaluable for in-house. You have the ability then at the start to work out your opportunities for data collection and capture as well too. Is that something you're seeing design thinking principles can assist with?
Absolutely. And I think, everybody talks about data being the next, well, not the next big thing, it's already here, but I think one of the challenges we have in such a large organisation is how you put your arms around the data. And as an organisation in the retail space, we invest millions in that. I think the challenge for in-house teams, and I think this would be probably common for many in-house teams, is how do you get the funding to actually put in place the infrastructure to collect the data, and then how do you mine that data, and what do you do with it, kind of thing. So I think part of the journey I'm on with the team is actually trying to demonstrate and draw the value in the data that we will get from various sources, and then how do we turn that into useful information for whether we're offering new products to the business, or whether we're showing them where pain points are, or key risks, legal or commercial risks are in the business. I think certainly my experience with the in-house team has been that a lot of what we're talking about here is to them is non-core on a day-to-day basis. They just want to head down, do the legal work. They've got a lot of demanding clients out in the business, and getting headspace for them to actually think about stepping out and doing a project like that. Even though it could be transformative and could be really important, that is a challenge. You're very resource constrained in-house, and so getting the bandwidth of lawyers to sort of do the thinking time for that, because they're still the subject matter experts, and you still need them obviously in the process to make it of value. So,
what do you see as the future of design thinking from an in-house context? Do you see that there are areas opportunities for it to be used in different areas?
Yeah, I do. I tend to be a non-purist about these things and think that it needs to be one element of a toolkit of tools that the lawyers have at their disposal. And I think it's a bit like Agile. Everybody gets excited about Agile, and we were having a conversation the other day, and people go, "Oh, I can't do Agile because I haven't got a Kanban board in my." It's like, it's not about Kanban boards. Let the Kanban boards go. And I think
be
that's
agile.
The thing. Yeah, be agile. Agile with a small A.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key thing for me is how do you actually just inculcate this into when you're recruiting lawyers to the in-house team, what's the experience that they've had in design thinking? Where have they used it? Are they of that mindset, so that they're not coming in just as pure black letter lawyers and going, well, I just want to sit in, don't have offices these days, but I just want to sit at my desk and do a law. And I think, how do you sort of look for, good EQ skills and good skills around empathy and customer focus. Because again, I say, if you're coming out of private practice, you can be a private practice lawyer and often not go anywhere near a client and operate in a world where you have, you don't really have to think about some of these issues. But, if you're in a small in-house team, there is a massive spotlight on you and the team around adding value. So, I think design thinking absolutely has to be a core part of somebody's toolkit when they're coming into a team. So,
fantastic. That's great. One last task for you, Neil, and that is to finish off this sentence with using Post-its and Sharpies.
Right. Good old
So I've
Post-its
got
and
this,
Sharpies.
yes. So we couldn't go without them. So the sentence that I'd like you to complete is: to me, design thinking means that the legal profession is less something and more something else, which can only mean an improved experience for everyone. So in terms of less, what do you think?
Certainly rigid, I think, for me.
Yeah.
And more agile with a small a.
Love it.
So,
Thank you.
is
If you
that
can
okay?
write those down, we'll add them to our board.
Fantastic.
That's great. Agile with a small a. Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mel.
Neil,
It's been
really
a pleasure.
enjoyed that.
Really enjoyed it.
Fantastic.
Lovely, thanks.
Thank you.